I paid for my first sister's wedding venue as a gift. Now my other sister feels entitled to the same, and our parents are calling me selfish for saying no. I'm a 32-year-old woman with two younger sisters, Michelle, who is 30, and Denise, who is 27. Denise and I haven't had a good relationship for the past few years, ever since a Christmas party incident 3 years ago. My mother wasn't feeling well, so she asked me to host Christmas that year. It was my first time, and I wanted everything to be perfect, so my husband and I put in a lot of effort to get everything just right. Everyone seemed to appreciate it, but Denise decided to make fun of everything we had done. She made several insulting jokes, though I don't remember exactly what she said. After a while, I had enough and told her to either stop or leave if she didn't like it. This led to a heated argument, and she left the party. Since then, we haven't spoken. Even at family gatherings, we both ignored each other. Our parents have tried to mediate and get us to reconcile, but instead of asking Denise to apologize for her behavior, they insisted that I should reach out to her. I was often told that, as the older sibling, I should be more mature and not let petty squabbles affect our relationship. Michelle supported me, saying I had no reason to apologize to Denise because her behavior at the party was unacceptable, and anyone in my position would have reacted the same way. Michelle and I both knew how spoiled Denise was and how our parents enabled her bad behavior. This wasn't a new issue, it had been this way since we were kids, likely contributing to Denise's entitlement. Our parents always favored her because she was the youngest, and they spoiled her rotten. Even when she misbehaved in public, they would laugh it off instead of correcting her. Michelle and I were raised very differently. We were well behaved and never got away with the things Denise did. It often felt like she had been raised by different people, which is why she turned out to be such a handful. Michelle and I tried to befriend her and guide her towards better behavior, but it never worked because she was too stubborn and ill-mannered. Unfortunately, the world didn't coddle Denise the way our parents did. She had been let go from several jobs for being rude to colleagues and even clients, earning a reputation as difficult to work with. Her nasty attitude had left her with very few friends, and after our fight, Michelle and I stopped speaking to her because we knew she was unlikely to change. She had a high opinion of herself and none for anyone else, and we were no longer willing to tolerate that behavior. We were all too old to force ourselves into a relationship just to appease our parents. Then last year, Michelle got married to Andy, her boyfriend of 6 years. Michelle and Andy had been together for a long time, and I knew him well. Andy and I shared a lot of similarities and interests, and Michelle's husband and mine often joked that Andy and I were more like siblings than Michelle and I, so naturally, we got along really well. When Andy proposed, I decided to cover the cost of their wedding venue as my gift to them. This was meant to be private information, but my mother discovered it while Michelle was discussing wedding expenses with her. We didn't think it would be an issue, but now it's causing problems. At the time, my parents said nothing about me paying for Michelle's wedding venue, but now that Denise is getting married, she expects me to cover her venue too. My parents argue that it would be unfair not to, given what I did for Michelle. A few months ago, Denise reached out to me after her engagement. She apologized for her behavior not just on the day of the Christmas party, but throughout our lives, and she expressed a desire to start fresh now that she was getting married. I accepted her apology, not thinking much of it because we still had to see each other at family events, and I wanted to avoid awkwardness. Her apology seemed sincere, and as she was my sister, I wanted to give her a chance to mend things. However, I did not anticipate things to turn ugly so quickly after our reconciliation. Denise and Michelle had made up last year around the time of Michelle's wedding, but that was mainly because our parents had emotionally manipulated Michelle into inviting Denise. Michelle is gentler than I am, so she invited Denise to the wedding after discussing it with me. I told Michelle to go ahead and invite Denise since they didn't have any issues and Michelle had only stopped speaking to her because of me. I didn't want to create tension by making it seem like we were ganging up on Denise, so I reassured Michelle that I wouldn't mind if she invited our youngest to sit her. I even encouraged her to do so as a gesture of goodwill to maintain family harmony. Denise attended Michelle's wedding and was surprisingly gracious. It was a bit awkward, but she didn't seek attention or act mean. She simply sat quietly, didn't speak much, and left early. At least she showed up and seemed willing to put the past behind her. This made me think she had matured over the couple of years we hadn't spoken, which is why I decided to forgive her when she reached out to me at the beginning of this year. We had been in touch sporadically over the past few months, and it was nice reconnecting with her and getting to know her as a different person. She really convinced me that she had changed and was no longer the spoiled, entitled brat she used to be. She also shared a lot about her fiancé, Hank. Denise and Hank had met through a dating app last year. She was so in love with him that they moved in together within a month and decided to get married after just a year of living together. I thought they might be rushing things, but they seemed genuinely happy, so I kept my concerns to myself. A couple of weeks ago, Denise asked if I could pay for her wedding venue, just what I had for Michelle's. Unsurprisingly, I declined. The circumstances of Michelle's wedding were different, and I wasn't willing to spend that kind of money on Denise's wedding. When I said no, Denise didn't argue, she just hung up without a word. I had no idea what was coming. Within an hour, my parents called, and to say they were furious would be an understatement. They were livid with me for refusing Denise's request. Apparently, right after our phone call, Denise had called them in tears, upset because she would now have to adjust her wedding budget. Denise had just assumed I would pay for her venue since I had done so for Michelle. Now she was accusing me of being deliberately snarky, claiming I had a favorite among my sisters. It's true, I did have a favorite, and it was Michelle because she was the only one who had consistently been kind to me. Denise, on the other hand, had always tried to put both of us down. Even at the Christmas party, she was trying to belittle me, and it wasn't the first time. We usually ignored her antics to avoid drama and giving her the attention she craved. The one time I stood up for myself, we ended up not speaking for years. So, yes, I had a favorite, and it wasn't Denise. She had brought this on herself. I didn't see any reason to feel guilty about it, and I told my parents they couldn't guilt-trip me into paying for the venue. Denise and I were just starting to reconcile, but we had a long way to go before our relationship was truly repaired, and I wasn't about to pay for her wedding without a solid reason. I explained to my parents that I had known Andy much longer than Hank, whom I had only met twice during lunch with Denise, and we barely spoke. With Michelle and Andy, it was different because Andy was also a good friend of mine, not just my sister's partner. I saw paying for their venue as a wedding gift from the heart, and they hadn't even asked for it. I wanted to do that for them. With Denise and Hank, I didn't feel obligated to cover the venue or contribute in any significant way. I was willing to buy them a gift from the registry, like the other guests, but I wasn't going to pay for their venue. It may have sounded harsh, but Denise and I just weren't as close as Michelle and I were, and I didn't know Hank at all, unlike Andy. My parents weren't pleased with my explanation and decided to keep arguing with me until I agreed to cover Denise's venue. They insisted that I couldn't pick favorites because it was problematic, and they didn't want me to hurt Denise just months before her wedding, fearing it would tear the family apart again. They told me they had narrowly avoided issues at Michelle's wedding by having her invite Denise to avoid questions. They insisted we needed to present a united front and wouldn't let me ruin that this time. It became clear to me that maintaining the appearance of a normal, happy family was more important to them, which only seemed more ridiculous to me. So I stood firm in my decision and told them I didn't care about what others said. Let them gossip if they wanted. I wasn't going to be pressured into paying for the venue. My mother almost cried after arguing in circles with me, and my dad called me incredibly selfish and entitled. I nearly laughed when he said that, as it was obviously Denise who was being entitled. When I asked him to explain, he claimed it was selfish of me to expect the family to stay in touch if I wasn't willing to step up and support my little sister. I had to hold back laughter and try to take them seriously, as it was clear they were grasping at straws to get me to agree. I told my parents they were free to cut me off because I wouldn't be contributing to Denise's wedding, and if that meant sacrificing my relationship with them, I was prepared to do so. I was tired of their constant attempts to manipulate us into going easy on Denise. This time, they were asking too much, and I was drawing a firm line. If that made them angry, they'd have to deal with it or cut me off as they had threatened. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I was sick of fighting with them or Denise. Even if we made up, it would just lead to more manipulation in the future. And that was something I wanted to avoid. So they could either have a relationship with me on my terms or just leave. I laid out a very clear choice. They could continue to fight for Denise or let it go and not risk their relationship with me. They obviously chose to keep fighting because, to them, spoiling Denise was more important than being fair parents to all their kids. They cursed at me and said they never wanted to speak to me again. I only wish they had stuck to that decision. After the call, I didn't expect them to contact me soon because the fight had been intense, but they called the next day. They told me they had decided to cut me off since I wasn't acting in the best interests of the family, which was just a fancy way of saying I was being selfish. I think they got the threat of cutting me off would scare me into paying for Denise's wedding, but as I'd said, I didn't care anymore. I told them to go ahead and even offered to block them myself so they wouldn't have to put in any extra effort. They were furious, calling me a selfish brat and predicting I'd regret this when I had no family left to care about me. I didn't pay much attention to their threats because the drama was getting on my nerves, and I hadn't signed up for any of this. I told them to stop bothering me because no threats were going to make me contribute to the wedding, and they might as well give up trying. At this point, they were just making fools of themselves. My parents stopped calling after that, but Denise was always there to replace them. She started calling me, accusing me of being mean-spirited. She tried to play the victim, claiming that the reason she had always been mean to me and Michelle was because we had treated her like an outsider in our private little club, making her feel alienated. Honestly, that was a load of nonsense. We always tried to include her, but she would turn up her nose at us, and that's how she ended up feeling like an outsider. I wasn't buying her victim act and reminded her that she couldn't gaslight me into believing her nonsense. I blocked her personal number, but she found other ways to contact me using her fiancé's phone or friends' numbers. Since I didn't have those saved, I couldn't ignore her messages. I was getting impatient and couldn't tolerate the constant annoyance. So the last time we spoke a couple of days ago, I said something that really hurt her again. She was going on about how I was hurting her feelings and how I owed her because I had contributed to Michelle's wedding. I snapped and told her I owed her nothing because she wasn't as close to me as Michelle was. She had never treated me with respect or love and always took us all for granted because that's how she was raised. I told her that if she had ever bothered to be nice to us, I would have gladly contributed to her wedding without her asking. Her behavior over the past few days, acting as if I owed her, was tacky, ridiculous, and entitled, and it was really getting on my nerves. Denise still had a chance to back down and let this go, but instead, she chose to argue and make things worse. She claimed that the only reason she expected me to cover the venue was because I had done it for Michelle. She suggested that I was too insecure and jealous of her to let her have a beautiful wedding, fearing that all our relatives would talk about her wedding and she would win again. She implied that we couldn't stand the idea of her having the wedding she wanted. It was completely absurd. No one thinks like that. We're all adults, except maybe her. In retaliation, I told her that maybe the reason I didn't want to contribute to her wedding was simply because I didn't like her and didn't want to waste my money on a marriage that wouldn't last, given how she drives everyone away with her behavior. She lost her mind, started screaming at me, but I didn't stick around to hear her out and hung up. Things have become chaotic since then. My parents and a few other relatives have contacted me, saying what I said was out of line because Denise is now really miserable and believes that suggesting her fiancé would leave her was a low blow. Honestly, I don't feel guilty for telling my sister her fiancé might leave her because of her behavior. Update 1. Hi, I read through the comments here and most people agreed that I didn't say anything out of line. If Denise didn't want me to lash out, she probably shouldn't have tried to insult me while asking for help. I guess it's true. I have no reason to feel bad just because my parents and a few other relatives are supporting her. Michelle and Andy, along with my husband, don't think I said anything wrong, and neither do most of you here. So I don't think I need to apologize for anything. I honestly wish they would understand this because things have gotten really out of hand. My parents have been relentless, insisting I apologize to Denise and take back what I said because she's hurt. I don't even understand why my comment hurt her so much. If she has faith in her relationship, my words shouldn't bother her. I don't know them that well, so my comment should be pretty much irrelevant. The only reason I can think of is that she isn't confident in her relationship, and that's why my words got to her. Maybe I hit a nerve. It's just a thought, but it might be true given her reaction. I can't think of any other reason why someone would take this so hard. It might be for attention, but I think she gets plenty of that from our parents already, and she hasn't made this public yet, so it seems unlikely. Either way, I'm definitely not going to apologize to her because she doesn't deserve it. She can continue to cry about it. It's not like she's going to cancel her wedding just because I'm not paying for the venue. That's still going to happen, so I really don't understand what the fuss is all about. I have been feeling really bad about the way my family was treating me just because I refused to go along with Denise, but now it's clearer than ever that my parents don't care about anyone but her. She will always be their first priority, no matter how old she gets. They will continue to enable her until the very end, so it doesn't matter what I say. She's just going to remain the same person, incapable of change. Update 2. Okay, so the invitations to Denise's wedding were recently sent out. And guess what? I didn't receive one, and neither did Michelle. I can understand why she wouldn't want to invite me, but the fact that she didn't even invite Michelle, even though Michelle had attended her wedding, is just ridiculous. When it was Michelle who didn't want to invite Denise to her wedding, our parents made sure to talk her into it and get them to reconcile. It's clear where their loyalties lie. But now suddenly, they don't care about appearances because clearly what Denise wants is far more important than what Michelle wants at her wedding. The double standards are honestly sickening, and it makes me so mad. Michelle and I met for lunch the other day, and she told me that our parents even texted her to say she could still get an invite if she promised to cut me off and never speak to me again until I apologized. She told them to leave her alone and called them the worst parents on the planet. They started arguing with her, accusing her of being my minion. They were really vicious, saying that at this point, they only had one daughter, Denise. Apparently, Michelle and I are selfish and don't deserve to be related to them because we're clearly never going to make any sacrifices for our family. It's ridiculous how entitled they sound, and they don't even realize it because they think letting them walk all over us is the only way to prove our loyalty to the family. It's crazy how their minds work and the mental gymnastics required to make us the bad guys for not wanting to waste our time, money, and efforts on someone who will never appreciate them. We've given Denise several chances to improve her behavior and act like a decent person around us, but she just refuses to grow up. So I don't understand why we are expected to put up with it constantly and pretend that she is a nice human being when she obviously isn't. It's not our fault that she never learned how to be kind to other people or not treat them like garbage. The credit for all of that goes to our parents, who made sure their youngest daughter was the most insufferable and annoying person on the planet. They spoiled her, and I'd honestly say they ruined her life by making her so entitled. Now, nobody likes her, and she can barely hold down a job because of her horrible attitude. They certainly didn't do her any favors and are still enabling this behavior. It's just sad and pathetic at this point. Update 3. So, they're married now. Denise and Hank got married a few days ago, and obviously I wasn't invited, but I did see a lot of photos because they were all over my social media. I realized they got married in my parents' backyard, probably because I didn't pay for the venue. But they seem to have had fun, so I don't even know what they were all so mad about earlier. They could have just adjusted their plans accordingly instead of throwing a tantrum and making a big deal out of nothing. But, well, what's done is done. Now I'm just happy they're married, and unlike them, I don't want to waste any more of my time talking about them to other people, which they did at their wedding. A lot of relatives reached out to me afterward to ask if it was true that I had promised Denise that I would contribute to her wedding by covering the expenses for the venue, but then backed out at the last moment, which is why they had to disinvite me and change the plans to get married in my parents' backyard for free. So that's the version they're going with, but it was pointless because I told my relatives the truth, and they believed me because everyone knows about Denise's and my parents' reputation. They weren't going to buy that version anyway. Their attempt to save face was pretty useless, if you ask me. I haven't spoken to any of them since the last fight we had, and I don't really think we can ever get back on good terms after this. Way too much time has passed, and honestly, unless they can really prove to us that they have changed, I don't see myself having a relationship with any of them in the future. Michelle and I have tolerated a lot of disrespect over the years, but that has finally come to an end. Now my parents can no longer manipulate or guilt trip us into forgiving Denise, and I'm glad about that because sometimes things just become too much to handle, and that's exactly what happened with my family. Sure, it's not like I don't miss speaking to my parents because we did have a lot of good times, and they were nice to us sometimes as well. But in comparison to what happened recently, I feel like cutting them out of my life was the best decision I could have made. I was a little down the day the wedding photos were posted, but I soon realized that I wasn't wanted among those people anyway, so it's best for me to just stay away, and that's what I'm going to do now.